annals of history, one event stands out for its sheer absurdity and macabre drama: the Cadaver Synod. A trial where a dead pope was dragged from his grave to face judgment. Hi everyone, welcome to The Curious Past. Today we're diving into one of the strangest occurrences in papal history, when Pope Formosus, a man who had been dead for at least 7 months, was put on trial by his successor, Pope Stephen VI. Yes, you heard that right. Let's set the stage. The year was 897 and the Catholic Church was in chaos. Rival factions vied for power and loyalties shifted like quicksand. Pope Formosus had been a controversial figure. He'd crowned multiple rulers, played political chess with the Holy Roman Empire, and made plenty of enemies. But no one expected what would happen after his death. Pope Stephen V, Formosus' successor, ordered his corpse exhumed and dressed in papal robes. His lifeless body was placed on a throne in the Lateran Basilica to stand trial for alleged crimes against the Church. During the trial, a deacon was appointed to speak for Formosus, yes, the corpse on the throne. The charges? Violating canon law by leading multiple dioceses, committing perjury by allegedly breaking an oath to avoid church office, and serving as pope while technically a layman. Serious accusations, but mostly an excuse for political revenge. Formosus' supporters had backed rival rulers, and Stephen VI wanted revenge. So it's safe to say the defense didn't put up much of a fight. Unsurprisingly, Formosus was found guilty. Stephen VI stripped Formosus of his papal garments, annulled all his acts as pope, and declared his tenure illegitimate. But it didn't stop there. Formosus' corpse was mutilated. His 3 blessing fingers were cut off, and his body was thrown into the Tiber River. A gruesome end to a truly bizarre episode. Now, you might think the story ends there, but the Cadaver Synod backfired. The spectacle horrified many in Rome, and Stephen VI quickly became deeply unpopular. A few months later, he was deposed, imprisoned, and strangled to death. Talk about karma. As for Formosus, his body was recovered from the river by a sympathetic monk and eventually reburied with honor. Later, popes condemned the Cadaver Synod, and Formosus' legacy was rehabilitated. Pope Theodore II quickly nullified the Cadaver Synod and began restoring Formosus' legacy. Later, Pope John IX reaffirmed this decision, condemning the bizarre trial. Formosus' body was reburied in St. Peter's Basilica with full honors, symbolically undoing the humiliation. The scandal forced the Church to rethink its policies on trials and the treatment of deceased popes. To truly grasp the absurdity of the Cadaver Synod, we must first set the stage. Late 9th century Europe, a period resembling a medieval soap opera more than a stable civilization, the Papal States, ostensibly a bastion of moral authority, were entangled in the same chaos and scheming that plagued secular rulers. The Holy Roman Empire was more holy in name than in practice. Its emperors locked in an endless power struggle with local rulers, tribal leaders, and the ever-unpredictable Pope in Rome. Loyalties shifted faster than a knight could unsheath his sword, and betrayal was practically a cornerstone of diplomacy. The Papal States were no stranger to intrigue. By the late 800s, the papacy had become less a holy office and more a high-stakes political game. Popes had to navigate the ambitions of local Italian families, who treated Rome as their personal playground, while appeasing the Carolingians and their successors. The line between religious duty and political expediency blurred so much it practically disappeared, much like a tax collector at the approach of an angry mob. Pope Formosus, the star of our macabre tale, was a quintessential figure of this era. Far from a passive cleric, he was a seasoned political player. Before ascending to the papacy, he served as the Bishop of Porto, and gained a reputation as a shrewd diplomat, instrumental in crowning rulers and forging alliances. His support for Arnulf of Carinthia over Emperor Lambert earned him powerful enemies, particularly among the Italian nobility. Adding to his troubles, Formosus had a knack for walking theological tightropes. One accusation, later dredged up by Pope Stephen VI, was that he had been appointed pope while technically still a layman. Scandalous for a church already teetering on the edge of legitimacy. Meanwhile, the Holy Roman Empire, an institution that often seemed more like a bad joke at the expense of central governance, was in disarray. Founded by Charlemagne in 800, the empire had fractured under his successors, splintering power across Germany, Italy, and France. By 897, the once mighty Carolingian dynasty was in decline, and Formosus' habit of crowning multiple emperors was less about ecclesiastical overreach and more about hedging bets in a high-risk game. Unfortunately, when you play papal roulette, you sometimes end up with a loaded chamber. The Italian nobility, the Marozzias and Hugos of the world, viewed the papacy not as a sacred institution, but as a lucrative political tool. The Pope was essentially the medieval CEO of the biggest corporation around, the Catholic Church, and like any good CEO, he could be lobbied, threatened, or, if things went south, posthumously humiliated. The church itself was a battlefield for competing factions, with clergy aligning themselves with noble families or regional powers, leading to schisms, coups, and the occasional corpse trial. Dysfunction ran deep. Popes were regularly elected, deposed, and even assassinated at the whims of these factions. In one infamous case, Pope John VIII was poisoned and then bludgeoned with a hammer to ensure he was truly dead, a kind of medieval double-checking system. By the time Pope Stephen VI exhumed Formosus' body, the Church had become the stage for both spiritual and very earthly conflicts over land, influence, and survival. Stephen, deeply entangled in these rivalries, was allied with the Spoleto family, whose patriarch, Lambert of Spoleto, was livid that Formosus had crowned his rival Arnulf. The Cadaver Synod was as much an act of revenge as it was a warning to anyone who dared to cross Lambert or his allies. To understand the man at the center of one of history's most bizarre trials, we must look beyond the cadaver dragged before the world and consider the life of Pope Formosus. Was he a manipulative villain deserving of posthumous humiliation, or merely a pragmatic survivor navigating a world where ideals bent beneath the weight of ambition? Formosus was not born into the papacy, he fought his way there. Hailing from the small town of Ostia, he rose to prominence not through noble lineage or wealth, but through cunning and capability. As Bishop of Porto, one of the most important ecclesiastical roles near Rome, Formosus became known as a diplomat of rare skill. His reputation grew when he was sent on papal missions to Bulgaria and the Frankish territory. In Bulgaria, Formosus was so admired that Tsar Boris I requested him personally to become the Archbishop of Bulgaria, a move that alarmed Rome. The Church, always wary of any figure with too much influence outside its immediate control, denied the request. This foreshadowed the tensions that would mark Formosus' career, an ambitious cleric who seemed to gather both followers and enemies in equal measure. Formosus' political instincts truly shone during the power struggles of the late 9th century. The papacy, far from being a spiritual refuge, had become a pawn in the ongoing contest between the Holy Roman Empire and the fractious Italian nobility. At the heart of this chaos was the question of who would wear the imperial crown. As Bishop of Porto, Formosus aligned himself with Charles the Bald of West Francia, one of many claimants to the imperial title. This earned him favor with some factions, but made him a target for others. When Pope John VIII, his superior and a man described as both paranoid and ruthlessly pragmatic, sensed that Formosus' growing influence posed a threat, he accused him of conspiracy, stripped him of his bishopric, and excommunicated him. Exile, however, did not diminish Formosus' ambitions. Like a seasoned chess player, he bided his time, building alliances and waiting for the political tide to turn. When it did, in 891, he ascended to the papal throne. Formosus' reign as pope was marked by bold, sometimes controversial decisions. His most consequential move was supporting Arnulf of Carinthia, a Carolingian prince, as the Holy Roman Emperor. This decision directly opposed the powerful Spoleto family, who had their own imperial ambitions. Formosus not only crowned Arnulf, but also invited him to invade Italy. Politically expedient, yet further destabilizing an already fractured region. To his critics, this was betrayal. Formosus had abandoned Italian sovereignty for the favor of a foreign power. To his supporters, it was pragmatism. The papacy needed the protection of a strong emperor, and Arnulf was the most viable option. Was Formosus a villain? It depends on who you ask. To the Spoleto family and their allies, he was a schemer who betrayed Italy's interests. To his supporters, he was a shrewd leader who ensured the papacy's survival in a turbulent time. What cannot be denied is that Formosus operated in a world where morality was a luxury few could afford. The late 9th century was an era where ideals were regularly sacrificed at the altar of power. Whether hero or villain, his life and afterlife stands as a testament to the perils of power in a world ruled by ambition. Pope Stephen VI is often remembered as the deranged pontiff who put a corpse on trial. But was he truly a fanatic, or just a pawn in a ruthless power struggle? His story is one of ambition, survival, and a world where reason took a backseat to politics. Before becoming pope, Stephen navigated Rome's brutal political landscape, where the papacy was less a sacred office and more a prize for the powerful. By 896, when he ascended to the throne, Rome was a battlefield of feuding noble families and warlords, each vying for control of the church. Stephen owed his position to the Spoletan faction, led by Guy III and Lambert, who sought to cement their dominance over central Italy. Their support may have secured his election, but it also made him their instrument. In this high-stakes game, loyalty wasn't an option, it was survival. Stephen's papacy began in the shadow of Pope Formosus, whose reign had deeply divided the Church. Formosus's decision to crown Arnulf of Carinthia as Holy Roman Emperor had directly threatened the Spoleto's grip on power. By the time Stephen took office, his backers demanded retribution. The Cadaver Synod, bizarre as it seems today, served a clear purpose: to erase Formosus's legacy and reaffirm Spoletan control. Exhuming his predecessor's corpse and putting it on trial was less about justice and more about spectacle, an unmistakable warning to any would-be challengers. Whether Stephen orchestrated this grotesque display or was coerced into it remains uncertain. Some accounts suggest he grew increasingly unstable, raising the question of whether he truly believed in his actions or was merely a desperate ruler clinging to power. Stephen's world was one of shifting alliances and violent consequences. No pope ruled in isolation, and a single misstep meant exile, deposition, or death. The Cadaver Synod may have been less an act of insanity than an act of desperation, his best, if misguided, attempt to solidify his fragile position. If he thought it would secure his reign, he miscalculated. The trial horrified Rome, turning the public and even his allies against him. Within a year, he was overthrown, imprisoned, and strangled to death, a brutal end to a papacy defined by excess and paranoia. Was Stephen VI a madman or a pawn? The truth lies somewhere in between. He was ambitious and willing to take extreme measures, but he was also trapped in a deadly political game. If Formosus was the cunning survivor, Stephen was the doomed captain of a sinking ship. His grotesque gambit didn't save him, it sealed his fate. Few roles can rival that of the deacon tasked with defending Pope Formosus during the Cadaver Synod. Imagine being this man, summoned to the grotesque spectacle of a trial where your client, let's not forget, is not only dead but several months into the process of decomposition. Yet, as surreal as the situation was, this deacon's role was pivotal, embodying the very essence of farce colliding with duty. Who was this brave, or perhaps unfortunate, deacon? History has not preserved his name, leaving us to speculate about the mindset of a man roped into the job of a posthumous public defender. Perhaps he was a minor cleric, plucked from obscurity with little choice in the matter. Maybe he had ambitions of rising through the church ranks and saw this as a grim but necessary stepping stone. Or, just as likely, he was a man whose primary qualification was an inability to say no to a higher-ranking superior. It's hard to imagine how he approached his brief. Did he see it as a solemn duty to defend the dignity of the papacy even in such grotesque circumstances? Or was he inwardly screaming at the absurdity of it all, offering up silent prayers that this ordeal would end quickly? One thing is certain, his presence at that trial was a stark reminder that in late 9th century Rome, even the most grotesque rituals required an air of officiality. What could his defense have possibly entailed? Here sat the corpse of Formosus, clad in papal vestments, but otherwise entirely incapable of speaking on his own behalf. The charges, violations of canon law, perjury, and illegally ascending to the papacy, were as serious as they were politically motivated. The deacon had no evidence to offer, no witnesses to call, and no hope of a verdict in his favor. Faced with such an impossible situation, did he lean into the theatricality of it all, speaking for Formosus in tones of righteous indignation? Perhaps he appealed to the divine, invoking God as the true judge of Formosus's soul. Or did he adopt a drier tone, muttering perfunctory objections while keeping one eye on the nearest exit? Surely, as the trial dragged on, he must have wondered whether he had inadvertently stumbled into one of Dante's yet-to-be-written infernal circles. It's tempting to imagine the deacon must have had moments of gallows humor, perhaps muttering under his breath, "Your Holiness, I hope you're not expecting a witness here," or praying that the smell of his client wouldn't waft too strongly toward the judges. Did he practice his opening statement in the mirror, only to be interrupted by fits of laughter or sobbing? And what, if anything, did he tell his friends afterward? "You won't believe the day I have had," seems like a vast understatement. His presence at the trial also raises practical questions. Did he feel the need to treat the corpse with reverence? Or was his focus entirely on the living audience in the room? Did he occasionally glance at Formosus's lifeless form and wonder if the late Pope himself would have laughed at the absurdity of it all, were he capable of doing so? The deacon's role, as bizarre and tragic as it was, has been overshadowed by the grotesque spectacle of the Cadaver Synod itself. Yet his presence reminds us that even in the darkest, most absurd moments of history, some must carry on, performing their duties with whatever dignity they can muster. Perhaps in another time and place, this deacon would have been a scholar or a preacher, remembered for his theological insight or his pastoral care. Instead, his legacy is a footnote to one of history's strangest trials. A man whose greatest contribution was his ability to keep a straight face while defending the indefensible. In the end, one can only hope that he found solace in the knowledge that his role, however grotesque, was a testament to the resilience of human professionalism. Or at the very least, he could laugh about it afterward, albeit nervously, over a stiff drink and a sympathetic audience. For the average Roman citizen, life in the late 800s was no stranger to chaos. The city was a patchwork of power struggles, an uneasy coexistence of ancient grandeur and contemporary decay. But even in a world rife with corruption and intrigue, the sight of Pope Formosus' lifeless body being dragged into court surely stretched the limits of credibility. Reactions would have varied as Romans gathered in taverns, marketplaces, and church steps to discuss the scandal. For some, the spectacle would have inspired horror. "What has the church become?" they might have whispered, clutching their rosaries and glancing nervously toward heaven. To them, the Cadaver Synod was nothing short of sacrilege, a terrifying sign of divine wrath looming on the horizon. Others, perhaps more cynical or world-weary, would have seen the event as grotesque entertainment. After all, in a city where gladiatorial contests were still part of living memory, the trial of a corpse might have been morbidly fascinating. One can almost imagine them trading gallows humor at the forum. Well, at least Formosus didn't object to the charges. Yes, but his defense didn't have much meat to it. For a select few, particularly those allied with Stephen VI's enemies, the trial may have been proof that the papacy had descended into lunacy. These individuals would have quietly filed the memory away, waiting for the political tides to shift so they could use it as ammunition against the current regime. Many medieval Christians were deeply superstitious, interpreting unusual events as signs from God. The Cadaver Synod would have been no exception. Was it a divine punishment against a sinful church, or a grim parable illustrating the dangers of hubris? Some might have seen Stephen VI as a righteous avenger guided by heaven to expose the crimes of Formosus, even after death. Others, however, might have seen the entire ordeal as a test of faith, a call for repentance and reform in a church that had lost its way. There were surely those who believed the Cadaver Synod to be proof of the devil's work. After all, if Satan was going to infiltrate the church, why not do so with a spectacle so shocking that it would scandalize even the most devout? The Cadaver Synod's impact on the church's reputation was profound and far-reaching. It epitomized the chaos of the saeculum obscurum, or dark age of the papacy, a time when Rome's spiritual leaders were often pawns in larger political games. For many medieval Christians, the grotesque trial symbolized the church deeply out of touch with its spiritual mission. The papacy's authority, already shaky in this period of fragmentation and feuding, took a significant hit. To see the supposed representative of Christ on earth dragged, literally and figuratively, into such sordid affairs was unsettling, if not outright scandalous. Trust in the church, particularly in its leaders, eroded. How could the laity maintain faith in an institution that turned its highest office into a stage for political vengeance? The fallout wasn't immediate, but seeds of doubt were planted. Over the centuries, the Cadaver Synod became a cautionary tale of what happens when spiritual authority is corrupted by worldly ambition. It was a stark reminder that even the church, supposedly guided by divine will, was vulnerable to human folly. For all its horror, the Cadaver Synod eventually gained an almost absurdist sheen in historical memory. It became a darkly comedic example of just how far the powerful could fall. Today, the Cadaver Synod is often viewed with a mix of fascination and disbelief. It remains one of history's most bizarre scandals, a potent symbol of the perils of power unchecked by reason or humility. For the people of 9th century Rome, though, it was a stark, surreal chapter in a city that had already seen its share of chaos, and one that undoubtedly left them with plenty to talk about over their evening wine. The Cadaver Synod, with its macabre theatrics, may seem like a relic of medieval absurdity, but its spirit lives on. While we no longer drag decomposing bodies into courtrooms, the practice of relitigating the past, smearing reputations, and settling scores through public spectacle is alive and well. In the political arena, reputations are shredded with the precision of a medieval executioner. A modern Cadaver Synod doesn't involve literal exhumation, but it does involve dredging up past scandals, real or manufactured. Whether through political memoirs, court battles, or viral takedowns, fallen figures remain fair game, their legacies repurposed as ammunition in ongoing power struggles. CEOs once hailed as visionaries often find themselves publicly dismantled when their past decisions turn toxic. Companies that once championed these leaders pivot overnight, offering public apologies, rebranding, and strategic distancing. If Pope Stephen VI were alive today, he'd likely find a career in corporate PR. The Cadaver Synod feels like a lost episode of Veep, or The Thick of It, where a desperate leader stages a posthumous trial to deflect scandal. Shows like Succession thrive on power plays, betrayal, and legacy destruction. Dragging a dead pope to trial wouldn't feel out of place in Logan Roy's world. Even films like The Death of Stalin or Dr. Strangelove remind us how quickly the ridiculous becomes terrifying. Today's courtroom is social media. Viral threads, TikTok exposes, and trending hashtags put historical figures on trial with the same fervor as Stephen VI's court. Decades-old tweets or long-buried scandals resurface, turning the deceased into posthumous villains or martyrs. These reckonings, much like the Cadaver Synod, often feel less about justice and more about spectacle. History repeats itself, not with rotting corpses, but with reputations exhumed and legacies put on trial. As Mark Twain once quipped, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The Cadaver Synod may have been a uniquely grotesque chapter in human history, but its spirit is alive and well in our modern theatre of power and revenge. One can only hope that our future historians will find it equally amusing and slightly less smelly. The Cadaver Synod remains a chilling reminder of the chaos of medieval politics, and a testament to just how far some will go for revenge. An absurd but strangely poignant reminder that power unchecked can often lead to darkly comedic and deeply tragic outcomes. What do you think? Was this a grotesque overreach or the ultimate power play? Let us know in the comments below.